We have more for your ears only. I'm Catherine Herzog.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. Have banks do something that's not going to risk taxpayer dollars, not going to be too big to fail. That was Sanford Weill, creator of the Citigroup Superbank, now rethinking his bigger is better philosophy and supporting a return to the separation of investment banking from regular banking. Now this.
What we're constructing here is a very, very elemental conflict between good and evil.
Chris was able to amp up the stakes for this last movie and really take it to places that I don't think anyone's expecting.
Engine 8, Battalion 1 on a shooting, 9 George 2, Century Theaters, 14300 East Alameda Avenue. Engine 8, Battalion 1 on a shooting, Century Theaters, 14300 East Alameda Avenue. There may still be somebody actively shooting.
Batman's latest leading lady, Anne Hathaway, was terrifyingly on target in one of her promotional pitches for The Dark Knight Rises. Even director Christopher Nolan was hardly expecting his trademark screen violence to be overshadowed by the shooting at a midnight screening in Aurora, Colorado, that left a dozen dead and nearly 70 wounded. And there was real-life mystery behind the mayhem, clarified only partially last week by the disclosure that the admitted gunman, with dyed red hair and the Joker in mind, was under psychiatric care at the university from which he had recently withdrawn. In fact, he had even sent his therapist there a journal illustrating his bloody intent that might have prevented the tragedy if anyone had read it in advance.
Also last week, another self-styled Joker with another massive arsenal was arrested in Maryland after telephoning murder threats to the company from which he had just been fired. And film mogul Harvey Weinstein, for whom violent action is a stock in trade, suggested a Hollywood summit on bloody cinema. To consider Batman, murder, and movie mayhem more generally for your ears only, we're joined again by Boston Globe Movies editor Janice Page. Welcome back to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Clearly, the shooter in Aurora had not yet seen The Dark Knight Rises, but Globe film critic Ty Burr notes that the whole Batman series has struck a deep and sometimes violent chord with fans, especially young ones who can get quite aggressive towards any criticism of it.
Oh, definitely, and the website Rotten Tomatoes, which is an aggregator of those of movie reviews, had to shut down when fans were angered by some early reviews of the film.
And in fact, there were death threats posted on it.
Yes, death threats, rape threats. I mean, really, really ugly stuff.
But Batman is only one example of a favorite fantasy in movies today. Ordinary people who get superpowers and do battle with evil enemies. Talk a bit about that trend.
Well, I mean, that's the heart and soul of comic book superheroes from the beginning. So in that sense, it's not a trend, but because it very much trades on the idea that that when the world needs help, someone with superhuman powers is going to come to its rescue, and the battle will rage between good and evil on a massive superhuman level. But it seems that at times of economic downturn, post 9/11 fears, a time when we have screens that are putting even more distance between ourselves and our regular life, if you were inclined to feel disenfranchised, alienated, want to have a sense of empowerment, these things strike a chord maybe in ways that haven't previously been seen. And we have seen an influx. The other part of this is we've seen a lot of superhero movies this summer, the Avengers and the Amazing Spider-Man, and it taps into something that even I don't know if the superhero thing plays as well when we're on top of the world, for example.
And masks seem to make a difference, maybe because so many of us feel we wear one to one extent or another. I wonder what you think of Weinstein's suggestion for a summit on cinema violence.
I think anything at this point would help. I think that as Ty said in his piece, it's not right to necessarily blame the movie since this person had not seen this particular movie, although it's clear, or it seems clear, that he'd seen the previous, Dark Knight, and was referencing the Joker. There's a huge gulf or a wide space between blaming a movie and shutting down or attempting to censor artistry and being responsible. And I think that Hollywood would be hard-pressed to argue that they've been responsible where it comes to violence. There's, Peter Bogdanovich calls it correctly when he says it's at near pornographic or pornographic levels, this violence. And there's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of room for enforcing ratings. There's a lot of room for tightening ratings. There's a lot of room for saying that violence actually counts as much as sex and profanity when you're looking at a film. And there's a lot of room where it comes to marketing these films for them to be more responsible. I think any parent who's been in a situation where you're watching a football game in the middle of a Sunday afternoon and Saw 3 comes on as an ad, would really jump and to applaud something that would restrict some of that kind of marketing to people who maybe don't understand adult themes and violence the ways that an older adult can handle that. And granted, the shooter was not young, but that shouldn't stop us from taking this moment to look at ways that we could be more responsible and pull back on the violence.
Putting aside the larger social issues, let's talk about The Dark Knight Rises as a movie on which you and film critic Tiber disagree. What's his view?
Yeah, so his view, and a lot of critics share this, is that it's a masterpiece. It's the end of the trilogy. Christopher Nolan is an auteur in the clearest sense of the word. He knows what he wants. He has a point of view, and he definitely orchestrates his films in a way that are craft, and there's no doubting that, and I would actually agree with that. I'm frustrated by it because I would love to love this movie unconditionally. In fact, I love it, but with a lot of conditions. It's too long. And that doesn't mean that you can't have a 2-hour and 44-minute movie, but it's really hard to sustain the interest and the pull for that long, and so you really better have something. And he does, but I think the middle of the movie especially is lumbering a little bit, and it's crammed with so much kind of brainy information that, again, while I'm not advocating a brainless movie, it plods a little bit. And I think its chief problem for me is that it doesn't really have a central character, despite the fact that it's hung on Batman, who you can ride along with for the whole movie. At the beginning of the movie, the first third of the movie or so, the Batman character is brooding and broken and needs to kind of get back into even superhero mode, and then when he does, he's taken down, and this isn't really giving anything away, and so for a big portion of the middle of it, he's kind of stuck in a prison or he's confined, and then he rises up, as the title would suggest, but it takes a long while to get there, and he's kind of a supporting character to his own movie for a lot of it, and the other characters are not as, there's not one that's so compelling that you will, feel completely attached. And that's why I think people love Catwoman or Anne Hathaway's version of the Catwoman, because you're able to sort of see the electricity, the sparks fly whenever she's on screen. You don't quite know what she'll do, and there's some humor and lightness to it, and it's really needed. And finally, I think that the use of the kind of Occupy movement and the Wall Streeters and all that is a little cavalier for my taste. It's hung out there. These are themes, but you're never sure, really, is Christopher Nolan on the side of the rich people acting responsibly because the bad guys are the occupiers, or what's exactly? It'd be hard to read into it exactly what he's trying to say there.
Janice Page is movies editor at the Boston Globe.
Quote from the news, "Whatever it takes." That was the head of the European Central Bank promising enough support to stabilize the Eurozone's suffering banks and national economies, which rallied global financial markets, including Wall Street, where the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at 13,075.
Next, sports. Promise in London, penalties at Penn State. For your ears only.